The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, Hyphenly. It is our no-fluff love letter with hot takes, heartfelt stories, and all the feels of living in between cultures. Come for the nuance, stay for the vibes. Link is in the show notes. Hello, hello. Happy Friday, and welcome back to Lovely. Let's start with the obvious. So it was my birthday this past week. When I went back to work, everyone's like, what did you do for your birthday? And I was like, listen, what did I not do for my birthday? Like, I feel like I lived 50 lives. I did the dinners, I did the dancing, I did it all. And I feel like I'm still processing how loved and grateful and full I feel. And I'm going to do a separate solo episode about all of that. But today I want to talk about something that's been sitting in my mind for a while. I've been thinking about men lately. Not romantically, but actually maybe because I do date men. But what I'm talking about is, there's a huge narrative right now that men suffer in silence. But somehow it feels like that silence is getting louder. And on the other end of this narrative is a lot of women are exhausted, right? There's this collective exhaustion of being let down, disappointed, or made to feel like they have to do the heavy lifting in helping men get better. I keep asking myself, I'm like, well, where do we go from here? And what needs to happen first? Or does something need to happen first? Like, do women need to soften first, or do men genuinely need to get better first? And what does better even look like? My guest today, his name is Samir Mourani. He is an entrepreneur, and he is the host and producer of his own podcast called Gent's Talk, which is a leading mental health and self-development podcast.
Your old house, and there's 10-year-old Hassan sitting there. What advice would you give him? What would you say to him that he needed to hear that he was never told?
I'm stumped, man. I don't even know what I would tell myself, because I also lived like such a regret.
And Samir's mission, I feel, is, really having a space where he invites men to have the conversation about healing and growing and leading, but also feeling what they're feeling. Samir, welcome to Lovely. I'm so happy you're here. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, and happy birthday.
Oh,
happy belated
thank you.
birthday.
Thank you. When is your birthday?
December 6th, coming up.
Does that make you a Sagittarius?
It does.
Ooh, do you know like the main traits of a Sagittarius? Do you relate to those?
Over the years, people have sent me things, and I was like, oh, that seems to make sense, but I can't tell you I know for certain. So if you know them, please tell me, because I find this stuff fascinating. I just never dive into it.
I have a few Sag friends, and I dated a guy that was Sag. So I can tell you guys are very like free-spirited. You love to travel.
I love traveling. I don't like travel. I don't like planes. So, but definitely the free spirit, because I hate the feeling of being locked down or in a box. And that applies to every part of my life, not just relationships, but work, my passions, my hobbies, what I do with my time, all of that. As I've gotten older and experienced new things, the more I've come to realize that if for anything I get the sense that I'm being constricted into a box, it's every instinct, every fiber in my body wants to break out of that.
Can you think of a recent time when someone tried to tell you or put you in a box?
I was a full-time senior project manager in my other life. I had some challenges with, I don't want to call it leadership because the leadership lacked there. It was more so the people in charge. And they kind of wanted me to stick into a little box and just sort of show up, do my stuff, go home type of thing. And it stunted my creativity. It stunted my ability to think and grow and do more. And combine that with familial obligations, older parents needing more and more of your assistance and your time. It just put me in a position where I was at a fork in the road and I had to decide if I'm going to continue down this path or if I'm going to take the unconventional path and go down one that doesn't include a guaranteed salary, has no guarantee of benefits or even success and possibly and more likely failure. But it's that free spirit feeling of being able to do your own thing. So that was probably the standout instance where I had to break out of that box. And the other one was breaking out of the box of what I thought it meant to be a man. That one was, I think, by far the harder box to break out of because that was ingrained in me. That one was in my bones. It was in my subconscious since I'd been a child, right? Whether it was my father subconsciously or consciously, society, the other men in my life trying to tell me how to show up as a man in today's world, right? You don't show emotions. You don't express feelings. You don't talk about when you're not okay. You bury them. You man up, you move forward. You sacrifice your own feelings and thoughts because you're somehow supposed to be the protector of everyone else around you. And it wasn't until I learned the analogy, not learned it, but heard it on a plane one day of all places because I don't like planes. When the oxygen masks drop, they specifically tell you, you put on your oxygen mask first before you help anybody else. And so you can't fill anyone else's cup if you don't fill your own cup first. And that was when I started to realize I needed to recalibrate my own masculinity and I needed to break out of the box that I was constricted into, the one that society told me this is the one that I fit into.
True breakthroughs truly happen when you choose that unconventional path, whether that's with work, relationships, but specifically your identity. And, we'll get into the disconnect between growing up, the man that you thought you had to be versus who you actually wanted to be. And I think this is a great segue into a question that I like to ask all my guests because I think it's a great insight to learn who you are as a person. So talk to me about your connection to immigrant identity. What did you see growing up in your household in terms of your father or your father figures that has shaped you to be the man that you are today?
So I was born in Lebanon. And my parents left when I was about 6 months old because there was a civil war happening in Beirut, the capital. They had to leave their family. They had to abandon the country. And they came to Canada, they came to Toronto, and we were pretty much the only Arabs that at least I knew. And then I went to elementary school, high school, and never really met another Arab, truth be told. And so I kind of never really understood where I belonged on the spectrum of being, I was technically an immigrant, but my values almost aligned more Canadian and my identity aligned more Canadian than it did immigrant. I've always had this attraction towards my culture, but never really knew how to articulate it. I never really knew how to do anything about it. I didn't even know where to find information about it. And I started to identify more and more with where I was from. The interesting thing about that is then when I started working, I fell right back into what I was before. So I was never Arab enough to be fully Lebanese, and I was never Canadian enough to be fully Canadian. And so I was constantly ping-ponging back in the middle between these two identities. And so I was always technically an immigrant. It's a never-ending tug of war.
Yeah. And I guess that ping pong and push and pull effect of navigating two different identities, How do you think that showed up when you were trying to, go through life and quote unquote be a man? How were you acting? That you felt this is how I'm supposed to act. And then when you were going through life, you were like, wait, I need to be softer. I need to be harder. Like, again, was there a push and pull effect with how you were raised to act like a man, but you kind of were like, no, this is not who I'm supposed to be, or something doesn't feel right?
The first thing I want to say is I think my father, for example, did the best he could with the toolbox that he had. And so his language was limited. His toolbox was limited. If he opened up his toolbox and the only viable tool he had for every problem was a hammer, then that was the solution to every problem because he didn't have any other tools in there. And that's a byproduct of his upbringing and his father's upbringing and so on and so forth. And so when I was growing up, a lot of it was respond to problems through anger. I grew up a very angry child into my teens. And there's still moments even today where I find myself just ready and urging to have this negative outburst because that's what I've done my entire life. 37 years, or going on 37, that's what I've done for most of my life. It's hard to undo that despite all of the work I've done to undo that.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
So it sounds like you were performing masculinity rather than living it. And I was going to ask you, well, what did that cost you? You've been divorced before? Is that what it costed you?
Among other things, yeah.
If you're open to talking about it, like what was going inside of you that was coming out that kind of pushed it to that point of divorce? Like what was your partner asking you to do that you couldn't allow yourself to do because you weren't given the tools earlier on?
I met my ex in university and we started dating. Then I got a really good job and then we got engaged and then we got married. I got promoted. I kept getting promoted. We started traveling. And so I was checking off all of the boxes that I'm told that as a man, you're supposed to check off. 6-figure salary, nice car, bought a condo in Toronto, traveling to Turkey and Greece and Italy and all these beautiful places across the globe, married, families are happy. And so I was checking off all of these boxes and I thought to myself one day, wow, I'm content. This is what content is. Up until that point, any kind of negative emotion I'd ever felt in my life, I had never actually dealt with. So that was all just sitting in there. And when that happens, it doesn't take very much to sort of tip you over the edge because at any moment, any kind of trigger will open up Pandora's box. And then once that stuff is out there, you can't just simply, it's like trying to close up an overpacked suitcase. One day I get moved from one of my offices to another and the environment that I was moved into was extremely, extremely difficult. It was emotionally draining. It was stressful. And suddenly I realized, wow, my job, which had provided me with so much fulfillment, no longer did that. I looked around and I was like, I don't actually have anything else that provided me any kind of fulfillment. And that spoke volumes about the fact that my relationship didn't provide me that kind of fulfillment either. But I didn't have the words to articulate that. And I was also afraid to even say those things because I'm like, I can't stir the pot. Like, no, this is not what guys do. This is not what married men do and all those things. I didn't have any men in my life that I felt comfortable speaking to. Nobody who had modeled the ability to say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Let's talk through this. Again, I buried everything. And so I spiraled into this sort of depressive state where I was extremely unhappy, came across a bunch of YouTube videos and podcasts and all these things. And it talked about, start exercising, eat clean. This will help with your mental health. And again, I wasn't talking to anybody about this, not even my partner. And so I started doing that. And then I became obsessive. I started working out every day. I went on the keto diet. I dropped from like 205 pounds to 160 in 3 months. It wasn't a healthy drop in weight. When your confidence is in the tank, when it's this small, the smallest compliment makes you feel like you're on top of a mountain. And I started getting all these compliments on, wow, Samir, you look great. You've lost so much weight. You've put on so much muscle, all of these things. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I started dressing better. I started acting with more confidence. Meanwhile, I had done absolutely nothing to nurture my relationship, whether by extension or because my ex didn't do the same thing. I don't know. We started to drift apart, and we got to a point where we were just not on the same page anymore. One day, I think it was February of 2020, she had just come back from a work trip, and we were just not on the same page. And she's like, you know what? I just can't do this anymore, and packs her bags and leaves. And I had to do a lot of reflecting, but I chose not to. I decided, well, this is my new reality. It sucks. It's painful as hell, but I'm going to bury it because that's what I've been taught how to do. And so I just continued to work, go out, distract myself. And then the pandemic happened and lockdowns happened. And that's when I was forced to isolate. And on one night, it all kind of came crashing down. And I went to wash my face because I had tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. I couldn't stop them. And it was the kind of tears that were physically painful. When I washed my face and I looked in the mirror, I was like, I don't recognize who this man is. I don't know who I'm looking at. And that's when I realized I needed to drastically change. And so I had to almost do this entire recalibration of who I was from start to finish, piece out all of the traumas that I had dealt with growing up. Like I said, the death, being cheated on, all of those things, my behavior, the way I failed. Did I flirt too much? Was I behaving appropriately? Was I not showing up? Was I supportive or not? All of those things. And that's really hard to do when you're doing it by yourself and you've never done therapy in your life. And you have to sort of examine and face your demons because I was scared of the alternative. It was only then in 2020 that I started to understand what I needed to do to break out of that box that I was in.
So that was essentially the turning point where you really had to look inward and be like, okay, well, what do I need to do differently? This whole time while you and your ex-wife were, struggling in this relationship, and like, did she ever like turn to you and was like, talk to me, tell me what you're feeling? Was that ever done? And you were just like withdrawing back, or you both were kind of just like, you both just didn't talk about it?
I'm confident that she made attempts.
And could that have saved your relationship? I think what I'm trying to get at is that the narrative right now, or from personal experiences, we decide to walk away when we've tried and tried and tried. And I think the collective exhaustion comes from, you can work on things when the man comes to you and is like, hey babe, like I'm struggling, rather than disappearing. And I feel like a lot of people are doing that. And again, I'm not blaming that, you're doing this because like you want to do it. I understand that you've been conditioned to act this way. But I think the conversation does need to shift to having that thought in your head, like, we can't be the only ones that are trying to nurture and do the emotional parenting. It kind of has to innately come from you too, just to communicate. Like that's the baseline. Like let's start there. You don't need to fix it, but just be like, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know how to name or the language to describe what I'm feeling. But do you think if you did that earlier on, that could have saved it?
Could it have saved it? Potentially. But I'm glad that it ended the way it did. Not ended the way it did. I'm glad it ended, period. I needed to be out of that relationship, just as I assumed she needed to be out of that relationship. We're not on speaking terms, so I have no idea where her stance is on any of this. But I needed to be out of that relationship because it's unlocked something in me that didn't exist before. All of that had to happen for me to finally turn a corner, which is so unfortunate, which is why I prioritize trying to have these conversations with men today, because they might be in the relationship that is the right one for them. Mine wasn't for me. I'm in one now that is day and night better suited for me at this stage in my life. At the time, I was an immature man who didn't have any emotional intelligence or self-awareness and was distracted by shiny, always trying to check off that next box. So yes, the onus and responsibility is on men, adults, to have these conversations, to understand the importance of communicating with their partners, to understand the importance of going to their partner and saying, hey, I'm going to fumble through my words here because I've just never really done this well and I'm not really good at it, but I'm feeling something negative. I don't even know how to name it, but there's just something that's not right. And I just wanted to share that with you versus the silent treatment of, I used to do this where I would be upset about something really, and I would manifest that as anger, but really and truly I was sad or I was hurt. And I would never say those words though. So I'd only show it as anger. And then I would get more angry because somehow my partner didn't read my mind and understand what had happened to me. And I'm like, how could you not know what's going on? There's definitely an onus and a responsibility on us men to have these conversations. On the flip side of that, in a perfect world for women, and believe me, I feel for you, the guys make the attempts. You got to remember, most of these men have lived their entire lives under the notion that they're not allowed to have these conversations because somehow they would be seen as less of a man. And in some cases, they're fearful that their partner of a decade would somehow look at them as less of a man and leave them if they express that kind of emotion. And so they're fearful of that and they're looking for the permission to have those conversations. And so sometimes what's helpful is where a woman would say to the man, hey, let's work through this together. And it's okay if you don't know how to articulate it. There's an element in there of creating a safe space for the man to have that conversation. Now, I've also, in my journey, when I started dating again, would meet women where I was very forthcoming about, hey, I'm on this journey, I'm learning things and I want to be more expressive with my emotions and tell you these things. And, don't be surprised when you hear some men say that, they did try to express their emotions to a woman they're seeing or a woman in their life, their sister, their mom, their cousin, their whoever. And that woman wasn't even able to receive that. Your partner shouldn't be your partner, your therapist, your confidant, your business advisor, your parent, all of these things. It's just irrational to think one person can do all of that.
And I agree. I think empathy matters from both sides, right? But I think maturity is also recognizing that love isn't about like emotional parenting. You can't expect that from like one or the other, right? Like if you're in a partnership, you both have to regulate. You both have to communicate, because if one person is always soothing and the other is always withdrawing, that's not connection. There's imbalance, and you need balance in relationships. And I think you're right with where your stance is, that as a man growing up, you were told to do the opposite, or when you're actually doing the opposite, it's not being received well. But I think also from the other side of the equation, as women, we've been socialized to be emotional regulators in every single room. And I think a lot of us are done confusing like caretaking with intimacy. I understand like both parties need to be compassionate, but what I would also advise men is that I appreciate and can understand the courage and bravery it takes to be in touch with your feminine side, and kind of display that. But also like you have to get to a point, whether that's with therapy, having more male friendships in your life, that you can talk about heartbreak. You can talk about when things are going great. Don't be discouraged if one person isn't being receptive to how you're showing up. That's only redirection for you to find that next person to show that to. But that only comes with when you have a secure sense of self and you know that this is the man that I want to be, and this is the man, I'm staying true to myself. Just like you do in business, when you go into a boardroom and you pitch your idea and one executive is like, I don't like it. I feel like as a man, you're going to continue and go into another boardroom and pitch that again because you believe in it. So believe in yourself and just continue to do that. And that's also how you find yourself aligned with the right person.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
I want to ask about your current relationship. After doing all the work that you've been doing, how did you show up differently? What were the things that you felt were coming out that really brought you into alignment to meeting her? And what does this relationship look like today?
Well, we're married.
Yay.
We got married in May.
Congrats. That's beautiful.
Thank you. It was the best day of my life. So 6 months into the pandemic, typically when you're going through what I had to go through, it could take years to resolve. But I was in lockdown. And so what first started off as this really fearful experience of just being in isolation, dealing with all these emotions, turned out to be the best thing to happen to me because I actually had all of this free time to sit there and reflect. And then I realized, I'm like, I think I might be ready to start dating again. And I felt weird at first. I was like, I'm a divorced guy. Well, actually, at that point, I was still in the middle of a divorce and it was getting messy. I downloaded the app, hated it, deleted it, and then was like, it's the only way I'm going to meet someone. So I downloaded it again. Mila and I matched the next day. This was on Tinder. Of all the people I had matched with, so I'm just going to send her a note. I don't know why, but I'm just going to send her a note. I was like, hey, just checking in, if you want to chat, it'd be great. If not, I'm going to be deleting this app like tonight. And she actually responded. She's like, hey, I'm so sorry. I don't actually check this app. I hate it. And we haven't stopped talking since. On our second date, she was living up north a little bit. And I drove up to her and we went for this nice walk because that's all you could really do in the middle of a pandemic. And my phone started blowing up. My ex-brother-in-law was trying to call me and text me because there's some new drama with the divorce. And she looked at me, she's like, do you want to get that? And I was like, I don't, but I should. And so I got out of the car to take this call. And she's just sitting in the car now. And he's telling me about all this new drama and whatnot. And I was just looking at her. And again, second date, we've known each other a total of like 6 days. I turn to him and I'm like, you know what? I can't deal with this right now. I'm busy. And he's like, what could you be so busy with not to deal with this? And I was like, I can't talk. And I hung up. I got in the car and she's like, is everything okay? And in that moment, I felt this urge to revert back into the version of me that existed in my last relationship. To shut down, to not talk about my emotions, to lie. I mean, I owed this relative stranger absolutely nothing. And then I thought to myself, well, wouldn't that run contrary to everything that I had just worked on? And if this is meant to work out, it will. And I need to be honest at all times, because that's the vow that I had made to myself, that I would never let myself spiral back into that version of me. And so I told her everything, start to finish. And at the end, I just said to her, I know this is a lot. If I was on the receiving end of what I just shared with you, I would probably be a little turned off and red flag and be like, I'm out. So I totally understand if you never want to chat again, you want me to drop you off at home, your house is 5 minutes away. I get it. She sat there for what felt like forever. And she says was maybe a minute. And she goes, can I ask you some questions? I'm like, you can ask me anything. And she started asking, like, do you still love her? Are you still, like, where are you in this divorce process and all that stuff? No, I don't. This is all the work I've done over the last 6 months. I'm realizing that relationship no longer served me. It played an important role in my life at the time. No longer here. This is where I failed. Here's a list of all the ways I failed in that relationship. And here's all the things that I'm working on to make sure that I show up better in my next relationship. And she turned to me, she's like, you tried at life, you failed, but you're showing up again. And I can't blame you for trying at life. So I'll stay. Took her to New York last year for her birthday, proposed in New York at the Plaza Hotel because she loves it there. And this past May, we got married.
The one thing that I take away from this, and I hope people that are listening take away from this too, is I think healed people or people that are on the journey to healing, or you can't fully be healed. There's always something that's going to come up. But I think they show up differently. They love differently. And I think this divide is just, sometimes it's uncalled for, because I feel like when men feel safe, they open. And when women feel seen, they soften. And I think it was something really beautiful about the fact that you were like, listen, I'm not only going to be honest, but I'm going to be transparent. And I think clarity is the sixth love language that I think we're all looking for. You literally wanted to be transparent because you're like, I see something here and I want to be really open and honest with you. I think if I can encourage more people to trust intention, the impact will be there. And I think that's kind of what we saw in your story. But I kind of want to get into something else that I alluded to in my intro. I want to hear your take. I'm big on socials. I'm sure you have to be too with the job that you do. There's a big conversation happening, the male loneliness epidemic, men suffering in silence. The more and more you talk about it, the more and more language there is, and the more and more you learn about it. I feel like we're hearing that they're going through all of this and they're suffering, but I also feel like, is there enough action being taken? There's one thing to talk about it, but are you actually doing the work to get better at healing? I know you are, but you have a lot of men on your podcast. What do you think they're really struggling with? Is it loneliness? Is it disconnection? Or is it something else entirely? Like, what's the insight that us outsiders need to have that is so misunderstood?
When you spend the majority of your life, consciously and subconsciously, by coworkers, friends, sports on TV, society, your family, that the expression of what you feel, human emotions, runs contradictory to who you are as a man, and that they run on opposite lines. If you feel emotions, you're being too girly. If you're showing emotions, if you're crying, that's not a manly thing to do. That's weak. You need to stiffen up. And so when you're a young man and you're conditioned into thinking that, and then the people around you are equally conditioned to thinking that, when you grow older, you don't know how to express the emotions. You're still feeling them. You've been feeling them your entire life, but you don't know what to do with them. So whenever I have this conversation with women about this, and then, they ask, like, help explain it in simple terms why men have such a hard time with this. I'm like, take the last time you felt extremely emotional about a subject or an incident in your life. Now imagine what would happen if you didn't actually deal with it. If you didn't let out that cry, if you didn't talk to someone about it, if you didn't journal about it, if you didn't talk to a therapist, but all you did was go, nope, not dealing with this. And instead you buried it. Now multiply that by decades and instances. And you've got a person walking around with years of trauma and stress sitting inside of them. And that manifests itself in negative self-talk, addiction, suicide, depression, violence against women, violence against themselves, violence against others. They think that that's their natural state because they don't know any other way. And so when you hear about these men feeling this way and you go, oh, well, we're talking about it. Why isn't more being done? It really does take others to kind of put out their hand and go, here, let me show you the way. Because otherwise they don't know. You got to remember, you're talking to grown adult men who still have the emotional bandwidth, maybe, or intelligence of a young man, because they've never been able to flex that muscle. They've never been able to use it, right? It's like going to the gym for the first time and working out your biceps. You're going to be sore for days afterwards. So we need to create an environment where these conversations are happening more regularly. And it's why I do what I do on the podcast. It's why I do the talks that I do. It's why I work with Movember. It's why all of these things. Because if you see more men having these conversations out in the open and having them talk about these things ensures that hopefully, and I mean, I see the DMs, I get the messages from young men all over the world. Hopefully what it does is it encourages more men to go, oh, maybe it is okay for me not to be okay. And now you've got these 20-something-year-olds, 30-something-year-olds, 40, 50, 60, who are for the very first time going, okay, we're about to deal with these emotions. What's the first step? Can someone tell me? Because I honestly don't even know. And so there is a role that we all play in this capacity where if you know something, if you know how to do this, for the men in your life, help them, share with them, show them how to do it, right? You may be in a relationship with a guy and you're happy, but I guarantee there are men in your life, whether it's a brother, a cousin, a father, a son, a friend, or your partner, who still don't know how to work through their emotions because they've never been taught. And you can't be, to some degree, you can't be angry at someone for not knowing something because you don't know what you don't know. You want to hope that there's a willingness on their part to do something about it. If they're like, I don't even want to do anything about it, that's a different conversation. But if they're like, hey, I'm really trying and I'm fumbling and I suck at this because I've never done it before, but can you please just show me? I think we have that responsibility to help.
I partly agree. I think you're absolutely right in terms of there's decades and decades of conditioning where men haven't felt safe to fully be themselves. A lot of the times we're able to move past certain traumas and things is because something happens. You call your girlfriend, you go out on a girls' night out and you talk about it. And I think that is very helpful. And I do understand that back in the day, men couldn't do that so easily. But I also think as times are evolving, the metrics are evolving too. So my thing is, while I 100% agree that there needs to be compassion and empathy to understand that it's going to take you a little bit more time than it would take me to show up in a mature way or regulate my emotions. But I think it gets dangerous when all the responsibility gets shifted to the person that's receiving it rather than to the man actually being like, listen, this is something that I struggle with. Let me go find the resources. Let me go find the tools and then let me act on it. And then I think the reaction is different rather than starting from scratch and just blaming it. Well, I don't know how to do it. So I don't know how to do it, And I know you're not exactly saying that, but sometimes the story does go there. Well, I don't know how to do it, so accept me how I am, which is what I don't agree with.
That is the problem.
That is the problem.
Agreed.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. The idea where someone says, hey, I don't know. I'm aware enough to know that I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know what to do about it. So I'm just going to choose to do nothing. There's something wrong with that approach. What I'm saying is in a scenario where someone goes, hey, I'm feeling something or I'm trying to work through an issue. I don't know what to do about it. I am trying to seek help. Can you also help me? Can you point me in the right direction? If you know, that is the scenario where I'm referring to where I'm like, there's a responsibility on all of us, right? And it's not to say that the responsibility falls on the women to do that work for the men, because I've said it earlier on in this conversation. The onus and responsibility, first and foremost, falls on the man to do the work himself. He's got to be willing to do the work himself. And I always use myself as that example. In my last relationship, I wasn't willing. And that was the problem. So even when someone finally said, hey, maybe you should see a therapist, I was like, only crazy people go to therapy. I'm not doing that. I'm good. But it took me sort of realizing, okay, I need to do the work. And then me saying to the people in my circle, like, hey, anybody know, the best approach to dealing with a really bad breakup? Or, anybody know the best approach to dealing with this crippling fear of what's about to happen? How did you deal with it? Right. And so there's two sides to that.
Hello, Finny. Did you think our story was over?
Just the grammar.
This Friday.
You're dead.
Dead is just a word.
Critics are saying Ethan Hawke is pure nightmare fuel.
Oh, Finny.
Discover the secret behind the mask.
think happens when you die? It's time to find out.
Black Phone 2, only in theaters Friday. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
So as we wrap up, I guess anyone that's listening and that really wants to take that responsibility on themselves and want to get better, what are maybe like 2 to 3 things that really worked for you that you would recommend to anyone that's listening?
The first one is self-reflection, because nothing else will matter if you're not self-aware of where you are. Where are you emotionally? Where are you mentally? And by extension, physically, because your physical plays a role and vice versa. Being self-aware of how you're feeling, where your thoughts are, whether they're negative or positive, how you talk to yourself, because we all talk to ourselves, is the key first step. Once you've kind of figured out, okay, where am I on the spectrum of feeling really, really good and making progress, or feeling really, really bad and feeling like I'm falling behind? Once you know where you are on that spectrum, you can now map a plan forward. This is where I'm going next. The second step, in my opinion, is to find a good group of men that you can turn to. Growing up, I always thought that the only people I could speak to about anything remotely emotional were women, because I'm like, they'll understand and they won't judge me. If I spoke to another man, he would judge me. But in reality, what I needed in a lot of those instances was just another male figure, whether it was my father, an uncle, a brother, a cousin, whomever, just to be like, hey, I've gone through a similar experience. This is how I dealt with it. Because there's something about having a man-to-man conversation where you're like, oh, okay, not only are you sharing your experience, but I can also learn from your mistakes and I can relate to them and you can relate to me. And so there's a different connection that happens. And then the third step to all of this is mapping, once you've done all this, it's not like, all right, cool, check, I'm healed, I'm good. It's ongoing work, right? It's consistently checking yourself. It's consistently checking in to say, okay, have life's curveballs shifted me towards this side of that spectrum? Am I feeling negative these last few weeks because a business deal went sour, a family member got sick, I'm feeling a little stressed with the uncertainty of the future or whatever, and now I'm suddenly a bit more agitated and rude and impatient with my partner, my friends, my kids, whatever. It's that consistent check-in. It doesn't ever stop. What happens though is you build these micro habits of consistently checking in with yourself. How am I feeling this morning? How did I sleep? Did I get my exercise in? Am I eating right? Did I get some sunlight? Did I get some fresh air? Did I go for a walk? Am I watering the plants in my life, my relationships? Am I nurturing them? Right? Doing those little things ensures that you're never too far off balance, because you're never as high as you think you are and you're never as low as you think you are. You're always somewhere in the middle, but you're teetering a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. It's about trying to find that balance in the middle.
Those are some great pieces of advice that I think are very applicable. One of the main things that I feel is important for the healing process of both men and women, I think having genuine connections in your life and having people that you can lean on when you're going through something, even though you don't know what's happening, you just show up so differently. It's funny. I recently met someone very secure, very it just feels different the way he shows up, right? And I think obviously this person's been doing a lot of the work himself. But the one thing that I could pinpoint down to is he has a lot of great male friendships in his life. And we would go on dates and we would probably have an argument. And then when we would come back together, I'd be like, oh, I debriefed with my friends. And I'm like, wait, I debriefed with my friends. And I think there's something so magical that happens when you just I feel like people aren't looking for solutions right off the bat. They just need a safe space to vent. And then when you say it out loud, then you self-reflect, like you said, and then you're aware of, hey, this seems right. This seems wrong. This is what I need to do to move forward. So men need to be with other men who have healed perspectives and perceptions of women, and women need to hang out with women who have healed perceptions and perspectives of men. And I think when that happens and you come together, that's when the magic happens. Okay, so I do this thing where wherever I have a guest, they leave a question for my next guest. The last time I had my guest on the show, her question to you would be, what is the number one thing in yourself that you hope your partner sees in you or has seen in you in your case?
That I've worked extremely, extremely hard to heal the little boy inside me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for being so vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage and bravery, and like you said, the work to show up as yourself. What is a question you would like to leave for my next guest?
This is kind of like a question / direction, if that makes sense. I always ask myself, kind of to help balance me in the middle of that spectrum that I talked about, would younger you looking into the present be proud of who you are today? Would future you looking into the present be proud of who you are today? And if the answer to either of those was no, then you have some work to do. So ask yourself those two questions, and then you'll know what you need to do next.
Yeah. So question followed by action. I like it. Okay, well, this has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I liked your analogy of the plane. You know, you gotta make sure your cup is full to be able to pour into another person's cup, but also be willing and receptive when people are pouring into your cup. So I like that. And then I think the main point that I'm also taking is that, maybe the real work isn't men versus women. It is men and women versus our conditioning, right? Because I think life gets easier when both parties try to stop winning and start trying to understand. Samir, if anyone wants to find you on socials and tune into more of your work, what do you have to say to them?
Please do, because a lot of what I do is premised on people tuning in. So you can find me on all socials just by my name, Samir Mourani. And then the podcast is called Gent's Talk, Gents Talk, available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. It's also on board Air Canada and WestJet, and soon to be a few more airliners in the coming months, which I'm really excited about. Also, I offer this to every single person I meet or at any conference I speak at or anything. Shoot me a DM. Let's chat. The conversation doesn't have to stop here. And the final thing I want to add is to the point you just made. Mila and I have this approach to issues or problems where it's not her versus me, it's her and I versus the problem. And if we feel like it's her versus I or I versus her, we'll stop and go, hey, what's the actual problem? Now let's physically step onto the same side, stand side by side, and visualize what that problem is, and let's deal with it together because we are a team. And so I encourage everybody to do it that way too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Really, really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, if you think that this episode will benefit someone, please share it with them. Leave a comment if you enjoyed it. And like always, I will see you next Friday. Lovely is an Immigrantly media production. This episode was produced by Sadia Khan and Shay Yu, written by me, Mahek. Theme music, sound design, and editing by Lou Raskin. Other music is by Epidemic Sound. Tune in every Friday for more Lovely.